Not that we're concerned with this, we're concerned with what? Say that again. I'm not going to sort of come up and say, what do you think of Harold Wilson? Right? Somebody's got to evaluate these things correctly there. Anyway. Yeah. But if I didn't find teaching exciting, I'd give it up. I think you better think about that a fifth year, really, from your own point of view, your own lives. It's not for me to tell you how to run your lives, but I do suggest very seriously you end up in a job that is boring, then think hard. There are some people that do boring jobs all their lives. In fact, I had a boy come to me the other day that came to visit me, left school at the end of the fourth year. Very clever boy, actually. No names, no pack drill. He came to me. I must say I was very busy indeed, and in him coming to visit me, I had to stop work, which meant I had to work halfway through the night after he'd gone. But I was very glad he came. I found what he had to say very interesting, and he was very charming, and what have you. But he was telling me about working in a factory round here, or in Cheston, and he was actually amazed at what went on in factories. It was an eye-opener. He was utterly amazed that there people came in, and there was one woman, for example, who worked at a machine, and it was so noisy, he had to wear things over his ears. He had gone mad. But these people got used to the noise. It was so noisy that, in fact, they couldn't gossip. They couldn't talk. And there was this woman, and I don't know quite what the machine was doing, but it was some sort of drill. And all she did every couple of minutes was to brush away the filings or something that were, And she did this in silence for 8 hours a day, and she'd been doing it for the last 20 years. It was an eye-opener to him. I said to him, well, they do it because it's a bit of pin money for them, extra bit of money. Father goes out to work. They're a bit bored staying at home by the kitchen sink. I'd have thought it was more exciting by the kitchen sink, frankly. Well, all right, you can exaggerate it, right. But would you like to do that all day? Huh? But I said to the fellow, yes, but and anyway, they're able to gossip and yakety-yak. Oh, no, they couldn't hear each other speak. Well, it seems amazing. Let me, yes. Ah, well, yes. I'm not criticizing the person. I might, in fact, be criticizing the system, right? But really my aim there was not to sort of criticize anybody, but merely point out that it's very unfortunate, right, that people have to, in fact, do boring jobs. All right, some people can do boring jobs because they just switch off. They become machines. I don't know. We don't want to go into general studies and politics and economics and things like that, but while we're on that just for a moment, you do raise an interesting point, Jill. It is Jill, isn't it? Susan. God, I know you so well. Susan, Jill, Janice, no. Sue. Forgive me, I went to bed at 2:30 this morning. At 1:45, I was in a hotel, awful funky hotel with all rich people there. At 1:45, in Southampton Road, right next door Central School of Art, where I misspent my youth, talking to a very important bloke on aspects of education, that I had an appointment there. And at 1:45, I said to this fellow, and he was 60 and a very busy man, I think I'd better go off now. I've got to teach tomorrow morning. And if I hadn't said that, I think he'd still be talking. And I drove back at 80 miles an hour, got back and I was in bed a half an hour later, 2:30. So forgive me if I can't remember your name for that second. No, at that point, Sue, about people who've got to do boring jobs, I might want to question that. Is it worth sort of making people into automatons to do boring jobs so that we can be a little bit more richer. Eh? It's a moral issue, isn't it? Do we need? I mean, what I'm really, it's just a thought that comes to me. I mean, prior to our materialistic affluent society, when people worked on the land, right, and there were the farmers, and there were the cowmen, and there was the cobbler, and there was the shoemaker, and so on, nobody really had a boring job. I mean, we have boring jobs because we want them to make things that are boring to make so that other people, like you and I perhaps, can enjoy them. I think it's worth remembering that we enjoy some of the material, this sort of thing, right? I think we can do without it. We enjoy it. I mean, I say this sort of thing, your record players, and your hi-fi and your TV, at the expense of some people's lives. Have I exaggerated that? You think I've exaggerated it? Would you not accept that in order to enjoy some of the affluent things that you have, other people have to spend their life doing boring jobs? That is making them. Oh, all right. That's a fair comment. What you're saying is there's them and us. There's some people who don't mind being bored throughout their life. Oh yes. Oh, it's done in an unthinking way. Yes. Well, I'd love to go on with that, but we have diverted for a moment. One of the joys of the art room, I think, and perhaps you can tell me otherwise, especially as this thing is on, because there's your chance to really be critical, right? Because it won't answer back. What? Yes, I quite agree. Jobs are as boring as you make them, but on the other hand, some jobs are very difficult to make unboring. I remember doing a job, scrubbing the floors of it. I got the job, first of all, cleaning, washing up these whopping big cauldrons, greasy cauldrons, and they were twice my size. Right, and I had to wash all these up in a big kitchen. And I hated it. And I thought, how exciting would it be if I, instead of doing this job, I could scrub the floor, because at least I won't be over all the hot water and grease. It'd be much better to, I thought I'd try to graduate that. So I used my initiative and flannelled, or, you don't know that term, well, can't find another term, the manager, and he agreed to let me scrub the floor and got somebody else on the washing. And the kitchen was about twice this size, and I started at one end and I scrubbed, and it was marvellous. I thought, this is boring if I don't make something exciting, so I began to time it. By the time it was 11 o'clock, I'd get to that point, or by the time I got to that point, it was 11 o'clock, it was time for coffee. And then by the time I got to that point, so I gave some sort of structure. There was a pattern on the floor, and it gave me a lot of joy that as I scrubbed, the pattern would emerge. So I imagined I was a mosaic artist making the floor in Roman times. And as I scrubbed it, I wasn't just scrubbing, I was actually creating that image. In other words, I imposed my imagination on a situation in order to survive it. So it's true in that sense. In fact, I told this story. Well, I'll first of all tell you the end of the story. It's rather interesting. It might sound a bit conceited. But when I left that job, I think I stood it for about 4 weeks. And when I left that job, the manager came to me and said, do you know, have you got any friends that we could employ? Have you got any student friends? Because we've never had our floors done so beautifully. That was the end of the story. But we can recap even further. I told that story to a boy in this school who ultimately became a Jehovah's Witness, a very clever boy indeed, as a drawing of his in the headmaster's study, pen drawing, if you ever see it, beautiful drawing. And he left school at the end of the 4th year because he had certain religious, end of the 5th year, certain religious convictions. I thought it was a great pity. So that he can go round preaching the gospel, or, telling that the end of the world is nigh and what have you. Jehovah's Witness. He still does it. He wrote me a letter about a year or 2 years afterwards, in which he said, told me how he was getting on. He had to do a few part-time jobs in order to keep going. But thank you very much, Mr. Sumray, for teaching me how to not get bored while I'm scrubbing floors. And that's true, and it's a lovely success story. So there's something to be said about that. Anyway, we're diverting. Let's forget this issue and come back to it. Why did we get onto it? Oh yes, something about being excited about teaching. The unexpected in teaching. When I looked through these, I was really worried. I thought, how could I get over this problem? I've been teaching for a long time. This is why we got onto this question of being excited about teaching. I've been teaching for a long time. You would have thought, if you think about it, he's done it so often, he can do it standing on his head. And teaching isn't like that. The nice thing about art is there are no textbooks. Today we've reached paragraph 4. Well, there's no book that I can go up and look, how are we going to deal with this particular problem? Every day is different. I hope you get jobs where every day is different. Every day is a challenge. I've had this problem before. I deal with it differently with different people. But the interesting thing of fifth formers is when I put all this up, they look so totally different to when I saw them there. They look, first of all, much better. I don't know if it's because we've got odd masters or odd transcriptions of masters, because they're not masters, they're your paintings, right? They have a bit of you in every one of them. I don't know if it's because all those in between raise the standard up, or whether the paintings are, and I think they are, much better than when I looked, much more complete, much more exciting. And so therefore I'm almost lost for words. I almost feel when I put them up, I'm wrong. Let them go on with it. I don't. Let's hear what you've got to say about your particular problems. I'll go round and ask you all. Paul, where's your painting? Yes. Any particular problems? Supposing that we weren't going to talk about them, I said, all right, carry on. All right? What would be your problems, if any? Getting what? Why do you want to get it lighter? It's just a feeling that you have it ought to be lighter. All right, fair enough, but have you questioned that feeling? It's all right having feelings, fifth form, but you've got to question them. Are they the right feelings? Because feelings can be very misleading. You can think you're in love, and in fact you're not, so to speak. All right, you might think, but why do you want it to be lighter? I mean, let's put it in another way, Paul or anybody else. What's the aim? When is a picture finished? Very difficult question. When is a picture finished? Jill Slater. Yeah, that's begging the question when you think it's finished. When you think, all right, when you think you can't do any more. Yes. Does that make a picture finished when you think you can't do any more? No. So when is a picture finished? All right, when it's complete. But what is it that makes it complete? Well, that's not going to complete it. It might, in fact, incomplete it if you put it in the right colour. You can put a signature on a piece of paper and it would destroy the whole. You'd have to repaint it all to fit the signature, if you're silly enough to put a signature on your painting. When is a picture complete? You know, you've painted enough pictures. In some ways you're lucky. Often the bell tells you when it's complete, or the holidays, the end of the term, or Mr. Sumray says you won't do any more. It solves your problems. But supposing they weren't there, and you had to go on and on and on every day, like a professional painter, until it's complete. What determines it being complete? In other words, what... Trevor? Yes, but again, you're not really telling me anything. I want to know what this how it looks has got to be. That's not telling me anything, really. When it works as a whole, we're getting a bit nearer to it now. When it works as a whole, when there are no parts that don't quite fit in. Well, how many of these are finished then? Any? Jill, where's your painting? Over there. First of all, I must say, looking around, I do find them exciting, but I still keep on coming back to one particular painting, which really amazes me. This one here. This one. Keeps on attracting my attention. I wouldn't say she was the best draftsman in this class. I wouldn't say she was the best composer in this class. I wouldn't say she was the most intelligent person in this class. She's produced almost the best painting in this class. Why? What do you think of it, Paul? Is it complete? Is it finished? Now, let's ask Paul. Think it works. Therefore, it's complete. In a way. Mind you, one could make it work on a different level. I think that's even better answer than Sue. When is a picture finished? When it works. Part of its working is what Sue said, it's got to work as a whole. Right? It works. It's very interesting, this picture, because it works, although it's got very little detail. It occurs to me that one of your problems when you're painting these pictures is to complete it by getting in more detail. But I'm beginning to question now whether that is necessarily so, because this one has no detail, and yet it works. It works basically because the relationship of tones of colour and the relationships of colour work. There's no necessity in this picture of this particular style, right, to put any... I mean, there's no lines in it at all. If we look at this Toulouse-Lautrec, you find that one way he was able to complete the picture, he was compelled, rightly or wrongly, to put in lots of lines. I mean, the lines here, the lines all round here, the lines which act as textures, all sort of help to knit, if you like, or to marry all the shapes together. One would wonder what that picture would look like without the lines. One would suspect that without the lines it wouldn't work. This girl's been able to produce a picture without lines, and it works because the tones and the balance of the tones and the lights and the colours all fit together. So I don't know, where is she? Karen, is it? Supposing you had another period, double period on that. Supposing I said, all right, carry on with your work. What would be your immediate feeling? You would have put more, dear. Is it possible that if I said that, you would have sort of made a silent moan to yourself? Oh, golly, I can't take that any further. Is it possible? Yeah. It must be very pleasing then when I say that that's complete. All right? I don't really think in that particular painting there's any point in taking it any further. Would you agree that it is complete in itself? I think one problem, though, as far as examinations and your course, that you've got to be very careful of developing too early a style like that. I think you've got to learn to design pictures in such a way that you can take them further. But this picture relies on an atmosphere, and there's no detail in atmosphere. It relies on mood, and you can get mood without detail. It relies on a sense of drama. I mean, why it's one of the better paintings here is because it's very appropriate to the subject. You know, after all, if you come into a situation where people are fighting, you don't notice a locket round their neck. You don't even notice perhaps the clothes they're wearing. You might not even notice that they've got pyjamas. What you notice is the emotional tension of the scene. And why this is a good picture, it seems to me, you might have other ideas, is that she's not got bogged down by... I mean, the thing is, she hasn't got bogged down by trivialities. It might have been a bit of a fluke. It might be that she never got bogged down by trivialities or by detail, which would have been trivial in this case, because she couldn't do it. So what we've got to learn to do is pictures with detail before you miss them out, so to speak. Anybody else like to make a comment on that? What? I've made them all. Very naughty of me. All right, let's find one where I don't make any comments then. What do you think of this painting by Margaret? Anybody like to make some comments on that painting? Including Margaret. It's incomplete. Yes. All right. The tones have got to what? Be softened down. Well, that's an interesting observation. I mean, really, that's up to Margaret, not you, because it's Margaret's picture. And Margaret might well say, well, if you want to do a picture with softened tones, you go and do your picture, thank you very much. I'm doing mine. Right? Which will be a fair comment. In other words, like Karen has done a painting without any detail, just getting a feeling of mood and a movement of air, the vibration of air. That's what she's really painted. Little does she know it, possibly. She might have discovered in doing it that what she has painted are not the objects, but the air that the objects are displacing. All right? It's no good going to her and say, well, you ought to put more detail in, because she can, you know, if she's fluent enough and aware of what she's doing, is quite justified in saying to you, or to me, I don't want detail because that's not what I'm painting. And so with this one could say, Margaret can say, well, no, I want this to be not subtle. You're a much more subtler painter than I am. I'm a bit envious, maybe, of your subtleties, right? But I've got other strengths. Your subtlety at its worst becomes rather wishy-washy, but my unsubtlety at its best becomes strong, right? But I think it, nevertheless, it's a good observation that Paul has made. Why does he feel, Margaret, looking at that, he feels it ought to be more subtle. He didn't use the word subtle, he said soft. But it's the same thing. Why do you think he said that? There's obviously something's worrying him in the picture. So you agree with him in a way? Yes. Right, you think that the colours are too sharp and therefore flatten the thing and lose a sense of vitality because it's got no depth. Well, how are you going to solve it? Is it because the colours are too sharp? They don't blend in. should have picked... Ah, I see. The transitions are not, again, the transitions are too sudden. From not so much colour, isn't that tone we're talking about? Yeah, from light to dark. Right, so the tones are not, that's what you're talking about, so they're too sudden. You can have pictures where you've got sudden tone in order to give a bit of drama to the situation. I don't think that is the problem in this particular picture. I think Paul has seen something worthwhile here. It's made him a bit uncomfortable. He looks at that and he's uncomfortable and he says it needs to be softer. Somebody else, Trevor or Andrew, has said that after Margaret's comments, that the transitions of the tone are too sudden. I would say there's no reason why transition of tones in this particular picture can't be sudden, because it's appropriate with the subject, which is one of violence or fighting or agitation. And the thing about agitation, let's listen a little bit here. The thing about agitation, and this is to do with content of pictures, agitation isn't subtle and gentle. When somebody loses their temper, they don't watch their P's and Q's. When somebody loses their temper, they simplify their language. You know, almost to, you know, even the most educated person losing temper might well end up in a very crude structure of his language. You know, swear. Right? There's nothing subtle about saying you bloody bastard. Right? That's pretty earthy stuff. You don't sort of put in soft gentleness. Well, I'm not really, I don't wish to be personal, but I think, taking everything into consideration, that you're an obnoxious swine. Right? No time for nuances in a state of agitation, in a state of panic. You don't watch your P's and Q's. So I'm supporting whatever Margaret's intentions were. I'm supporting the fact that it's quite feasible in this subject to have these rather sudden transitions, Trevor. Would you go along with that? That's possible. So, all right, what is it then? Well, Sue. Lines all the way. Now that's interesting, because I think if we only talk about these two pictures in contrast, I think they're very good contrast. We're getting somewhere, possibly. Right? Sue has observed that there are lines all the way around it, and she says it in such a way, the implication is it's a criticism. Can you tell us more then, Sue? Because it is you've meant it as a criticism. Yes. I think absolutely dead on there. I think that one of the criticisms of this has got nothing to do, I think Margaret's got to think her own problems out, that it's got nothing to do with the colour relationships. It's got nothing, it's not mainly to do with the colour relationships, it's got not mainly to do with the tonal relationships, it might have something to do with the fact that she's got lines that contradict the colour and tone. As Sue was suggesting, there's light coming here, it shines there, it goes round the corner so it gets dark. What the blinking hell is a black line doing round the other side of its light? And if we look at a master's painting, if we can find one, whose is that, Karen's? No, she learnt a lot in doing that, but I know it's a slightly different style, Margaret. There are, in fact, lines in it, very subtle lines, but the lines act as tones. In other words, she has not put a line on that side of the body, because it's a light bit. There's the shadow, the light's coming there. What, in fact, she's created is an edge by the dark tone behind it, and not put a line. She's put the lines in, like here, for example. I suppose you can see it more clearly. It's rather a beautiful painting, Karen, where you've got an edge there, it's light against dark, there's a gradation of tone round there, and then, in fact, she puts the line on the other side, so it not only acts, so the line acts in three different ways fifth form. The line acts, first of all, to delineate or make clear the form. It acts as a rhythm, because line always acts as a rhythm. That line follows through, and it might be caught up here, and it might be, like the hide and seek of a line. And thirdly, it acts as a tone. Now what happens, and it's the criticism possibly you can make of Margaret, because she's a very, if I can say so publicly, or she knows, I think, she's a very clever girl, she's a very talented young artist, and yet she gets bogged down. Things tend to be clumsy. I think Paul is dead right when he says there's something wrong with it, it's not subtle enough. But what we've got to find out, we can go on, can we? Or are you getting bored with me? Getting bored with me? Can we go on a little bit longer? All right.
But if we got bored, all we had to do was post the more questions and that.
All right, Trevor. In other words, if you're bored, you've got to do something about it. Your boredom is not one-sided. It's partly me and partly you. How true. All right. What we've got to do, Margaret, and why I'm talking about this publicly, I think we can all learn from each other. So when I'm talking about her, I might well hit on something, I might well, or somebody else might say something and say, by golly, that's what I've got to do with my painting. I think we've come somewhere near some of your problems. There is something very clumsy about your work, all right? And I think it's partly to do with this tendency to solve problems is just putting tram lines round them, and usually black, right? And you go round and round thinking that's going to work. A thing works, fifth form. Now this is very important, and listen carefully. Basically, a picture will work, that is all fit together, right? If in fact the tones and the colours are right. You will never solve problems. You will never make colour relate to another colour if you put an outline round it. That won't solve it. You will never make tone right by putting a line round it. You will never make form right by putting a line round it. In other words, a line, Margaret and everybody else, is not an easy way out. That you put it all the way round and it fits together, because it destroys it. So you've got to watch that line. Yes, Trevor? Well, let's look at it. Yeah. Well, in fact, I would go as far as to say that this isn't a painting, but an illustration, which is a subtly different thing, or it's a sketch for a painting. I don't recognize it. Amazing how you found all these things that I thought I knew every blinking picture. Well, I do. It works as a yes. There isn't. It's perfectly true. But first of all, let me say this: I don't consider this a complete painting. I consider it a little bit a note of information in an artist's sketchbook. It is not a painting as such, say, compared with this complete statement. All right. Having said that, whose is it, by the way? Not Judy. Janet. Well, is it Lautrec or somebody? Who is it? It's amazing. If I didn't trust you, I'd say you bring it to me, because it doesn't look like a Degas to me, but I'll take your word for it. All right? Never seen it before in my life. I don't recognize it. It must be a very early Degas before he developed his own style. But as Trevor said, the line does work because the line is the whole thing is built up of lines, really. It isn't big broad areas like this and then a line round it. If you look into it, it's sort of raven shaped lines that are built up and built up. So this line here ceases to be an edge but grows out from the middle of it. Also the colour. The whole thing really is colourless, actually. It's a monochromatic sketch. Don't be misled by that vermilion or something behind it. It's really black and white. If I take a photograph of that, it will lose nothing in black and white. If I take a photograph of that, it will lose most. All right? It's not really colour, but a black and white sketch in nuances of greys. Right? No? You don't agree with me, Trevor. Well, tell me where you don't agree with me.
You say that's just a snippet of information like the
Uh,
right?
Yeah.
What about that young lady there sitting in front of the pot of flowers in the corner of the room?
Yes.
There's nothing else apart from her and the flowers in the corner,
Yeah.
which is there. But that, but it's a different kind of background.
Mm.
That could just as easily be taken out a quick sketch by some.
Could.
It's incomplete. It's just shut off.
Yeah.
Like, you see,
Yeah.
like that one up there.
Which one?
That big. That's,
Which big one? Listen. That. Yeah.
it's got more information.
Oh, yes, yes, I'll accept that. I'm not claiming that to be such a terrific picture, or saying something very profound. You know, I think it's a sonnet rather than an epic, right? And that moves towards the epic. Still doesn't alter the fact that this is a fragment. But yeah, a part of something. No, I think there's a certain. Yeah. Yes, and therefore it's not a complete statement. This is a bit. All right, let's leave that. Let's come to this picture here, because certainly this picture, which looked pretty clumsy when I looked through it, when you put it up there, and don't forget it's very difficult to view pictures with all other pictures around it. If we put a big mount on that and a gold frame round it, it would look even better still. That's very exciting, that picture, isn't it? That is Elizabeth's, is it? Anybody like to make comments about that? Anybody like to make any comments? Yeah.
In a different aspect of what
Yeah.
Because that one is all detail.
Yeah.
And Karen's one is
In fact, I'm utterly.
in different ways.
Yeah. Perfectly true. I'm utterly amazed, actually, Elizabeth, and all of you, at the way that picture does work when I put it up. I thought when I looked through it that it's got to be pulled together, but by golly, when you look at it from a distance, right, the colour, the tone, the quality of texture, the movement, all fits together and evokes the mood of this subject. The dark creases, yeah, the folds. What about the dark folds? Are my cigarettes anywhere? Pass them over, please. What about Andrew? It's always the same people, I noticed, making their contributions. Andrew and Trevor, in particular. Now, come on, let's have everybody. Don't be afraid of opening your mouth and making a fool of yourself. Claire. All right, well, tell me more about that. I think there's an element of truth. I presume this is meant to be a criticism, or just an observation. You're not saying whether it's good or bad, but just curriculum. In what way, Claire? Clumsy. All right, somebody suggested, let's forget the word caricature, because we have all sorts of everybody's got a different image of what you mean by caricature, but once you say clumsy, that's a bit more subtle in your observation. Claire thinks that these figures are clumsy. That is a criticism, implying it could be more subtle. We'll come to back to that point. I think that she's possibly right. But Andrew was saying something about the folds. Yeah? What does it? Yes. I don't think we should be concerned, surely, fifth form, about what a thing looks like. I mean, art's got nothing, well, I wouldn't say nothing to do with it. I don't think we worry too much about whether it looks like, but whether it evokes the right sort of mood. I mean, the reason, what value basically, now a difficult question, but really let's see if you do understand painting, what function basically are those folds in the picture? Movement, thank you. The reason, the value of putting those folds in that particular picture is to make the movement more intense, or to make the movement agitated, or make the forms, give the forms a sense of agitation, a sense of movement. There's no doubt, and despite all its clumsiness, I find this a fascinating bit of work, because despite all the clumsiness, and despite all the difficulties that the girl has had in painting it, if you look at that figure there, it really is in a state of falling. It's not like a cut-out piece of paper. I mean, I'd criticise Andrews, and I think it's Andrews, it might not. I like certain aspects of this composition, but if you look at these figures here, they're almost cut out. And not in 10 million years would they move from where they are, right? Whereas her, apart from the subtle rhythm of the pose, I think the short staccato-like brush strokes of the folds contribute towards the movement, but still clumsy.
When you say clumsy, but when people are fighting, they don't do it gracefully, do they? You don't go about like Barry Johnson.
Did you see Women in Love, the film Women in Love? Trevor, sometimes you make very sensitive, intelligent, pertinent, not impertinent, sometimes impertinent, remarks. Yeah. Oh, good, I'm glad. Odd times you make a facetious remark that doesn't fit. It's not worthy of you. Because first of all, we're not going to let that one go by. First of all, Women in Love, right? I would, if it's rubbish, I'd expect you to justify it. It happens to be that it's not rubbish. It was a film made of a very great novel, right? Anybody see Women in Love? I know it's a bit near the bone with nude men all. What? It's an X. It was X, and you're not allowed to see X films. Oh, yeah. Why I mention that is because there's a well-known scene where these two men wrestle with one another. They're in the nude, frontal nudes and the lot, right? Which was quite revolutionary for that film. But they're fighting in the nude. And if anybody turns around and tells me, when they look at that fight, that in fact it wasn't subtle and rhythmical and rather beautiful. A fight can be a dance, right? What? Fair comment. It was a composed fight. But I still say to you, Janet, is it not possible for a fight to have its own internal rhythms and its own internal beauties? Janet, is it not possible? Well, I mean, it's quite possible to take a photograph of some violent aspect of a demonstration, right, and analyse it and find, in fact, there are very subtle rhythms and dances going on. Hmm? Yeah. What do you
One of these blokes, or sketching, one of these blokes might get the colour in the corner of his eye and go wild. You don't get great movements, his arms and legs at the other bloke, round his throat.
Oh, well, I see what you... Yes, there's movement. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've misunderstood you. Yes, it's probably... it's nice you've got a record here, if it comes out, and I can see whether I've misunderstood you or you'll change your story. But anyway, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood you, misunderstood the word graceful, or confused the word graceful rhythm. It's perfectly true what you said, it's perfectly true what Janet was trying to say, that a fight, might have the rhythms I'm talking about, but they're not graceful rhythms. They can be staccato-like rhythms. They can be violent rhythms. All right? What was the criticism here regarding gracefulness? I can't remember. What was it? Who made the comment? Claire. Any more about that? Yes, Jill. On the light, yes. Listen carefully to that. I don't know if I agree with her, but I tell you what, I do agree that Jill's discovering a lot of things about painting, and if somebody, you know, that's, you learn from each other. Think, that's the way she used to paint, but now she knows better, sort of thing. Worth listening, because right? I don't know, I think you used to overdo it, you see. You used to put all your lines in. It was all like as if you used to destroy the form by having lots of corrugated cardboard round it, right? That is the danger when it's overdone. You're implying here that it's overdone. An element of truth. I wouldn't go the whole way. It's up to Elizabeth to decide how right you are. There's an element of truth in what you say. But I think she's got the right balance there. I think she just about carries that off. I'm not certain about the colour. People suggested it's a bit dull because it's a neutral grey. It'd be better if it was worked in with the colour. Diane, you want to say something? What about the, oh, you've said yes. I think it's a comparatively successful picture. I think there's a unity or oneness between the texture, the handling of the paint on the wall, and the handling of the paint in the figures. I think I like the static quality of all these verticals and horizontals to hold those figures in. All right, let's look at, let's quickly go round. No, perhaps we won't. What about finishing them? Now, what's the problem? We'll stop talking after we've got this answer. The problems of finishing them. Do you all feel that you've got a problem there? Janet? Interesting. Not enough range of tone, too much colour. A very interesting, it's a good comment about that painting. It's basically, it's a very good painting. Basically, it's a very good composition. I'm glad she's noticed that there are problems between colour and tone, that colour and tone are not the same thing. Mind you, answering that helps you go towards solving your problem, doesn't it? If in fact there's too much colour and not enough tone, then in fact you can change it. That was a way out. I'll see you you don't know how to change it. Can I make one suggestion, which is a very dangerous one, and I've told you before. It's certainly a little trick that helps push you forward, and that is this business of redrawing your painting. I think I told you the story, and and it bears repeating again. When I was a young artist, post-student days, painting pictures, at odd times scrubbing floors, because I got a bit tired of being hungry, I lived in Barnet. That's not very far from here. In a community of artists, and all communities like that are pretty awful, but still, you know, lots of artists together. They're just like lots of doctors or lots of teachers or lots of kids. There were two Australian artists living there, two young girls from Melbourne on the Ouse. And they'd come to England, listen to me please, they'd come to England for a couple of years because it was believed in those days, if you were going to study art, that if you didn't come to England to study for a couple of years, nobody in Australia would take notice of you, that the best place to study art was to come to England. And so a lot of people used to save up their money and get over here. I think they were very admirable, these Aussies, in doing that. There were these two young artists, bachelors, living together, don't get me wrong. They used to regularly get up about 6 in the morning, used to cook their breakfast, get down to painting, paint until midday, clean up, have lunch, and then go round the London galleries. And they had this regular routine, right? Regularly, disciplined. No matter what they felt like, whatever the weather was, they always got up at the same time, they had their breakfast, and they went on with their painting. And it was interesting the way they painted. They often used to paint on the same canvas. They used to share painting, and they'd do a big painting, and they'd both work on it. When it came to midday, never mind about the state of the painting, when it came to midday, they decided they're going to have their lunch and go out. They used to get a palette knife, it's a little painting knife, and they used to scrape down the whole painting, scrape off everything that they painted. They had their lunch, went out, the next morning at 6 o'clock, got up, have their breakfast, go to the painting and repaint it. At 1 o'clock, scrape it down again. They didn't, in fact, scrape the painting out. What, in fact, they did, they're working in oil paint, which you can't do with it. They're working in oil paint, and when they scraped the painting, what, in fact, they were doing was scraping all the detail. It's difficult to explain. They were spreading the detail into the form. So, in fact, they were creating a textured surface, and how could I explain it? Just imagine a painting where you've got a lot of detail, and then, in fact, you get a palette knife and scrape it. You'll blend it so it all becomes blurred. Then, when they came the next day, they redrew it and repainted into it, and then scraped it down. So each day they scraped it down, it was at a different stage, until ultimately, the last stage, they just put a few flicks here, and the picture was finished. No, because it's scraped down. The paint is scraped off. Now, it's difficult to explain in theory that, but what I'm really trying to get over is that every day they repainted their picture, they redrew their picture. And it's a useful tip. It's a dangerous one, but it's a useful one. Some of you go on painting and you never really redraw it. It's much better if you redraw, at least it's a good way out to redraw with line, right, your drawing, and then paint into that new redrawn line. Does that make sense to you? Well, I don't know if we've got any, have we got anything out of this conversation? What? Seriously? Jackie? What? Okay. Has it gone? Is it finished? No. Yes.